If you feel like you are losing your grip, might suffer a trip or abandon ship, open a can of whatever you sip and join the fellowship.
Welcome to Can You Hear Me Now? Our penultimate episode before the Christmas break. And we've got a very special guest that I'll introduce you to in a minute, who you'll be able to talk to directly by joining the fellowship, which doesn't cost anything and you don't need an invite. Anyone can join us on the Google Meet that is linked in the video description down below the main YouTube channel. But welcome, and just a few bits and bobs, little announcements and stuff. We've got a composer walk, and the weather forecast is good, so I think it's going ahead. So do jump on the train if you are planning to join us for a composer walk up in Edinburgh. If you go to our website, crowhillcompany.com, it's on the homepage, just link through. And it would be great if you could RSVP on the Eventbrite, just so we know how many people to expect. I'll never forget the year where the weather, we had to cancel it, the walk. So there was like 6 miserable individuals on their own in the sheep heed, but some poor lass who had looked up anything interesting going on in Edinburgh today on Eventbrite, and composer walk, that sounds interesting. Maybe we'll see like where different Scottish composers have grown up, and it was just 6 miserable chaps in the pub. It won't be that this time round. We'll be going for a lovely
miserable chaps.
Yeah, 7 miserable chaps. It'll be a good walk, and just make sure you leave a bit of extra time, because where we meet is a good kind of at least 15-20 minute walk from the closest road. But you'll be all warmed up and ready to go by the time you join us. And it's just a great opportunity to meet fellow composers, to not feel alone in the endless struggle that it is to carve a path, a way forward in the industry that is music. And what else are we doing? So next week, it won't be Wednesday, because Wednesday is Christmas Eve, and that's when most of the planet celebrates Christmas. So we're going to be doing a special Christmas Eve of Eve, the eve of Christmas Eve, on Tuesday. And we're going to be joined online from the Mediterranean by none other than my very good pal, Oliver Patrice Vader, who has launched his own sample company. And I want to talk to him about that. And there might be some special treats, seeing as it's Christmas and all. And then for your hangovers, the day after Hogmanay, New Year's Day, we're going to be doing a normal time, Wednesday, we're going to be doing a kind of a sum up of the year, maybe a bit of a quiz, some prizes, just a mellow. You're going to be nursing a hangover. I don't know if you guys are aware that in Scotland, they have 2 bank holidays after Hogmanay, because they know how to tie them on here. So there we go. So it's my great pleasure to introduce someone who's becoming a regular to the podcast, Mr. Pascal Wyse.
Hello. Lovely to be here.
So lovely for you to be coming up. And every time you come up, there's more gear, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, the corners of this room have more gear than my entire studio. It's extraordinary. It's like kind of museum of sound. I mean,
well, hopefully the next time you come up, it'll be in our rug shop, which we've.
This is exciting.
Yeah.
You bought a rug shop?
We bought a rug shop. It doesn't have any rugs in. It does have a leaky roof, but it's kind of a blank canvas to create just a space that, you know, I've been on a little bit of and I'm sure you're the same. I've been on a bit of a roller coaster journey this year with, you know, this kind of AI Armageddon rule promise, and I'm sure is not going to happen. But if there's one thing I do want to respond to, it's a gentleman who I think is it Sora or Sona, guys? The AI music making app, who suggested that no one really likes making music anyway. It's a bit of a pain. And he actually said that in a big kind of... And I think that is not something that I would... agree with at all.
How does that list develop? You know, because it's only, if you're going to say that, then you start saying, well, no one really likes cooking, do they? I mean, no one really likes sleeping anymore. Or chatting with their neighbours. I mean, what else is going to fall under the bus? You know?
No, exactly. And so the aim with the new place is just to create an area where we can really celebrate and promote making music, because you're a multi-talented, multitasking, really like
multi-mediocre, I think is the official
I think
name of my business.
No, but I think that we've talked about you have this great reputation within the world of podcasting, where you compose, underscore, you do lots of sound design, and you're doing this on a weekly basis. It reminds me of my job doing Inside Number 9, where you don't know what you're going to get every week. But you started fairly late on, and it'd be nice to talk about what motivates you to just keep on going, in what is a very competitive and difficult industry.
Yeah, the empty fridge mostly.
But you have other jobs, and you had other jobs.
Yeah.
But you decided to, shortly before or shortly after becoming a dad, you decided to bite the bullet.
Yeah, and record it while I did it. It's interesting. And I know we touched on a little bit on this when I was last here. So I hope there's been, at least some development in thinking. I think I was lucky enough to do a lot of different things. And for a while that was quite enviable. Anyone locked into a very definite career progression, someone, working, say, in law or something, or medicine or whatever, it seems it can look like quite an enviable position when you do sort of one thing one week, something else the next. You're dipping into all these different, quite exciting places, and apparently kind of getting the best of all of them and having a little taste of, everyone's pie, I suppose. But there does come a point where I think those returns start to diminish a little, because you see those friends of yours, really making great headway and achieving something, through that diligence and hard work. And I think I just reached a point, because I had done bits of acting quite badly. I'd done quite a lot of writing, journalistic writing. I'd been a sub-editor and an editor at The Guardian, and had also done quite a bit of music education and performing.
Your
trombonist, trombone and violin. And I'd also done a little bit of sound for animation. A friend of mine who I've done cartoons with over the years. In print, we did a cartoon for The Guardian too, in fact, over a period of about 12 years. I was sort of, I surveyed the scene and thought, well, all of these are hard to make a living in, so I'm going to try and pursue the thing that I feel most kind of passionate about or energized by, or at least that I feel I can sit down and do for most of the, X number of days. And in fact, music and sound, the idea of applying music and sound to other things, whether they be plays or films or TV shows or whatever, that was really quite an early desire. And it was, I would say, almost entirely fueled by being a passionate fan of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy as the radio plays. And hearing of this sort of mythical space called the BBC Radiophonic Workshop, and again, I'm sort of swimming around in cliche here, but that was the thing that showed me that radio had the best pictures, and I went around the houses a bit before getting back to doing that, not least because I sort of went off to college and realized I was surrounded by people who had so far advanced down that road already. I sort of was a bit like, oh crap, have I already lost this race before it's even started? But, that meant I went round and, I got into journalism, did lots of education work. And the thing that working with words really helped me with, I think, is how whenever you apply music to something else, which will often be scripted, understanding narrative, understanding the beats of the story, what a story's trying to do, where it can be opened out or helped with sound, I think it's easy to overlook how important that is.
Yes.
If you're what we might call, an applied composer or something. And I remember sitting down, I think it was one Christmas so many years ago, and Ilan Eshkiri was there. He was introduced to me through another friend. And we had one of those sort of, there was me sort of wandering around the citadel of, film, TV, music, thinking, can I find a loose brick somewhere here and crawl in? And so inevitably I was, buttonholing him for bits of advice. And we were quite drunk as well, which maybe fueled some of it. But I remember how passionately he said to me, he said nothing about music. He didn't go, say, go and buy this plugin or anything like that. He was just like, read scripts, understand narrative, understand how story works, then get on to, you must be able to do that, It was really interesting. I mean, I'm sure.
It's just absolutely great advice. Yeah. And it took me setting up this YouTube channel and actually going, why do we do what we do? It took actually doing that to actually think about it and go, oh, we're helping to tell stories. And I'm not joking. From that moment on, my relationship with directors and producers of stories, whether it be factual or fiction, improved radically, because actually we've all got the same goal here. And instead of arguing about what I'm doing with the music or what you're doing with my music or what you're asking me to do with my music, should we talk about this shared goal of telling a story?
Well, it gives you a place for to focus the conversation. I mean, one of the things I definitely struggle with or wrestle with, and deluxe problem and all that, but there is an expectation, I think, if you write music for other things, that that there should be this other part of you that is an expression purely of yourself, that you're your music for you. And I find that muscle set so different, and it's really interesting, and I'm much less fluid in that world. I would love to do more of it, and it requires a different confidence and a different, sort of stance almost. And I was really interested to hear an interview with Cristobal Tapia de Veer, who's a music I love, who did, of course, White Lotus and many other things. And he was quizzed on this idea, that like, oh, well, you do this music for telly, but surely there's, where's the real you? Where's the music you would love to make? He says, no, this is, I write the music I want to write. It happens to be on telly or whatever. Mm-hmm. But no, that is my music. And I feel like I'm sort of trying to develop the courage to say that, because I find writing, in the way that you just described it, writing for something that sits between you all, a project that you're all going towards, it just shoves my ego off to one side. And it's just like so liberating, because if you sit there going, no, you know what this scene needs? It needs a tango. It's like, if that's what it needs, then great, go off and do it and try it. But if I was sat on my own, in my little, woo, what am I? And what do I want to express world? I'd probably take about 4 weeks to decide if that tango was the right thing to do or not.
Absolutely.
So it accelerates something. I find that really invigorating, Of course, there are issues as well. If you are always collaborating, you are therefore sometimes compromising, or there are frustrations, there are time limits, all the things you've talked so eloquently about.
Yeah. I think so. I had a job interview today for a new commission, and I think that I was presented with a project that was going to be 2 years of my life, and I've done long-term projects, particularly computer games. And I think as you get older, you become a little bit more aware of, I've got 10, 15 years of still doing this. And what I think that what I ask myself is, what will make this commitment, I think bearable is too strong a word, what will make this commitment something that I will be able to give 100% or close to 100% for that length of time. So what I did is I pitched them an idea of how I'd like to do it. And it was based a little bit artistically, Thought that would probably keep my attention. But also from a practical point of view, I don't want to come to London lots. So I'm surrounded by all of these amazing traditional folk musicians. What if we were to use them? And I think that what I noticed was by really coming up with the way I'd like to do this, which is partly artistic, partly ego, partly, just keeping my attention, and partly something that was really fairly practical, is that definitely the client got the best out of me. And that is what I feel is a really good thing to do, is kind of go, how can I offer the best version of me? So it's not some kind of becloaked composer going, I think that I wanted to study octatonic and I want to do something along those lines. But more, I want to be stimulated by this as much as you're stimulated by what I'm offering up. And that really helped. Just so you know, I'm going to chat to Pascal for just a little bit longer, and then we'll invite everyone on the Google Meet. So again, just check out the address in the video description, and I'm sure you've got loads of questions for Pascal and stuff. And there's some really exciting stuff that you've been working on this year that I'd love to get onto. But just whilst we're talking, because you've been on this before, I think time and getting experience is something that isn't often talked about in our sphere. And I've had the luxury and the great honour of meeting so many hundreds of composers, some of which are hugely successful, and I'm yet to meet an overnight sensation. There are people, and there's those people that you go, Pemberton, that you kind of go, where is this little upstart come from? And then you delve in, you go, oh no, you've been at it. You've actually been working like professionally since you were 14.
Yeah. And Dan Pemberton was like, there's so much TV stuff he did and library stuff. And there's also that great moment, I don't know if you've seen it, in the John Williams documentary. I think he's on the Disney Channel at the moment.
Right, I've got to check that out.
Yeah, it's there's some lovely stuff in it. I mean, it's very, it's very loving. It's a very glossy, loving tribute, as well it should be, in my view. Yeah. But it's really interesting. He talks about the moment everyone started to know who John Williams was. And he said, he describes himself as already being quite a kind of knackered film and TV composer. He said, I'd done so much by then, he was, but the impression is of this, suddenly there's this guy and he's doing these amazing things. He'd been doing it for, decades already.
Yeah. The same applied to Jerry Goldsmith.
Yeah.
You forget that, he...
And it's also sometimes hard to kind of quantify what it is you've learned over the time. Wisdom is a funny thing. It piles up in interesting ways and you don't always know. Sometimes you're surprised by what you've managed to learn over the years, which has become just a sort of instinct. And one of the things I've been so lucky to be able to do this year, because, mostly my operation is just me. And I had the really nice problem of getting busy enough that I could give some work out to other people. Mm-hmm. And that's all, that's when you come from a really isolated, you work for you have your habits, you have your setup.
You're a shed dweller.
I'm a shed dweller, yeah. And it's like, there is that initial inertia you feel. It's like, actually, it takes quite a bit of time, doesn't it, to explain to someone else how this all works. And you almost panic at that moment because it feels like, the clock is ticking and this is not getting stuff done. But if you trust it and you get through, and what's been so nice for me is just being exposed to other ideas, and people half my age, yes, with different thinking, just fluid, interesting new ways of doing stuff that I hadn't thought of. And it's often it's often by sitting down with other people like that not only do you learn amazing things, but you also get a very nice bit of information or confirmation of what you've learned over the years, because they're often also saying to you, oh, wow, okay, yeah, that's interesting that you do it that way or whatever. So it's been so nice to be able to do that. And I hope next year will be similarly chaotic enough that I'll need some help, but we'll see. As you were talking about, I was wrestling with whether to do a job or not a month ago, and just slightly referring back to what you were talking about prior to this was, And I'd not heard this one before, and there are various ways you can put it. But he said, well, you could apply the old 3 L's. He says it's got to give you one of 3 things. It's got to be a laugh, or it's got to give you lolly, or it's got to be good for your legacy, you know. So I was like, oh, interesting. He said, yeah, I tend to put that little thing over it and say, you know, will it give me one of those things?
Yeah.
Just cue about an hour of text chats coming up with a different version of that. But yeah, sorry, I got off the point. But yeah,
not
wisdom.
at all. But do you? I mean, I remember the point at which, I mean, there's always a degree of imposter syndrome in the sense of, I think I've forgotten how to do my job. How did I do that? Yeah. That was a different me. I don't know. I've kind of like a composer snake. I've shed that skin, and have I left that ability behind? But I remember a clear point at which I went, "Oh, this is my job," and in fact, I'm not going to be able to really do anything else. Was there a point like that for you where you actually felt this is what I do, and I kind of know how to do it?
Yeah, but I think that's quite a recent feeling for me, because I definitely gave myself plenty of excuse to down the imposter syndrome, because see my earlier comments about fanning around doing a bit of everything. you know the nice way of putting that is, oh, you're such a Renaissance man, or people just say, yeah, you're just a jerk of all trades, you know.
Yeah.
So definitely for me, there's always that feeling of sort of catch up. But also, it's like sometimes, you know, for years I was what they call a layout sub-editor on The Guardian. So that involved me designing pages, you know, where the headline goes, where the picture go, editing the copy, and then, you know, produce a finalized page. And sometimes you're clattering through a lot of those if you're doing, you know, a supplement or something. And God, I did that for years. And I was really, really fast on a desktop publishing package, you know. And it really shocks me, like I'm just a sort of block of RAM, how pretty much all of that muscle memory and knowledge has just dribbled out of me. And I sometimes think, yeah, if I didn't sit down in front of Pro Tools or Reaper or whatever it is you're using, you know, how long will it take for it just to start to feel quite alien? You know, I don't know if you've come back from a reasonable break and just sort of gone, yeah, how do I? You know, just and you realise you're relying on this, almost like this RAM. You've got to keep going, which I'm sure doesn't answer your question.
No, I mean, I just no. I mean, it's great to hear that you've passed that point of going, well, this is actually my job now, and I feel I can do it, because so much of the creative and I think what is a real sap on productivity is doubt, and lack of confidence. Whereas, like, I know how to do this. I remember that. I mean, it was becoming a dad that. Well, there's no other way to put food on my kids' table other than this. But I think it was working on Poirot where I slipped into I don't know. It reminds me of you know, if you practice enough, you kind of get good at the piano, and you just kind of go, I know how to do these, and feeling that was very much, you know, that I was working with a lot of other people who knew how to do stuff. And not wanting to be congratulated on the fact that I just managed to do it and write an oboe part and all of that. And there was a lot of kind of serenity in that realization that, it's just it's not to do with talent. It's not to do with you know, qualification. It's to do with experience. And I think that's a lovely thing, because so many people there is such a huge attrition rate. So many people do give up or are forced to give up just to reach that point where you go, I've just got enough air miles under my belt. But I think also, you're right. Like any airline pilot, you've got to you know, you've got to top up on the hours. You know. But
also, you know, you talked about, say, the idea of, well, if I sit down and practice a piece on a piano, I will get better, and that's absolutely true, and that's, in a sense, measurable. But I think part of the reason why it takes quite a bit of time when you're writing for other things is that it is perfectly possible to write a really, you know, depending on how you judge these things, excellent piece of music and fail, because if the director doesn't like it, or says, no, that's wrong, or so you're fighting to get the confidence to please yourself, but then it's exposed to someone who may well then judge it completely differently. So there's those two sets of achieving and, if you like, experience-based relaxation that you're fighting for. So it does, and you have to. I mean, I still have this kind of bizarre, bright-eyed, pleased expression if someone writes back to say, "Hey, I love this. This is great." I'm like, I'm so rarely expecting that. I'm doing the kind of Bradley Whitford thing. Did I say that in the last podcast? There's a great interview with Bradley Whitford where he talks about how actors receive notes from directors. And he says, there are 3 thought processes and they all go through it. Note arrives. The first thought is, fuck you. Mm-hmm. Second thought is, I suck. And the third thought is, okay, what? And and he said we all get stuck at 1 and 2.
True.
We just get, and I can feel it as I know. It's almost like I can sense the email full of notes coming in, and I can feel those 3 modes kind of fighting each other.
Yeah.
Am I going to go have a moment? Am I going to manage to get myself through to, okay, this is good. Sensible. Yeah. Let's work on it.
Well, and I think it probably maps the 3 hemispheres of the brain.
It's like they're traveling.
You've got the lizard. I must kill the director. And then there's, I'm not going to be able to feed my family. I'm going to get fired. Yeah. And then there's, for pragmatic. Me, and that is a big thing that I've really grown up about, is just understanding the brain chemistry. And it's just like asking someone not to jump if you clap your hand behind their head. There's nothing. It's totally involuntary. Yeah. It's totally natural that you get that horrible sinking feeling, and then it's totally natural for some reason that you think that you're never going to work again and you fucked it. And I don't embrace it. I just endure it. I let it drain. I make sure I never respond to an email when all of that kind of
the cage come down.
Yeah, the synapses are firing and the hatred and the thing. And then I really love doing notes, and it's part of. I don't think I'm a particularly good composer, but I do like thinking that I'm doing a job well. And my job is writing music to picture, being a head of department. And if I can, you have to empathise also with them. There's nothing more frustrating. I mean, we've maybe had people paint a house or fix something, or, I want that pipe moved over there. And then you go, no, I meant just slightly to the left. And you come and why have they taken it slightly to the right? It's even more frustrating. And I think I take a lot of pleasure in receiving notes and then maybe not getting any more on that cue. Because it's like I've managed to interpret what you're saying. And I've managed to do it. And the other thing that I really pride myself on, and don't always achieve, but trying to take notes or revisions to a cut and do them whilst also maintaining the musicality, which is, I think, a little wrinkle that maybe the rest of the sound department doesn't really understand. You can't. No, but do you know what I mean? It is like there are certain internal structures that you're happy to. You're happy to move walls around and repaint them and, whatever, put a nice little hatch in there. Mm-hmm. But you have your line where you think, no, the architecture now is so fallen apart that the structural integrity.
It's like, we can't live in this.
Yeah.
I think note giving is a really interesting subject. And I think we all know there are some people who have this ability to give notes in such a way that you just feel. I'm not just talking about a shit sandwich, which is the the common thing. They give you it in such a way that just energizes.
Sorry, what a shit sandwich is.
That is I shouldn't assume. It's 2 slices of bread. No, choose your own shit. So it's really. It's the idea of delivering essentially a very critical note by putting it in a sandwich. The sandwich in this case being saying something nice at the beginning and something nice at the end. Am I right? Is that
yeah, absolutely.
And it's it's very transparent, and yet it sort of does work because where, as you say, the lizard is there and the lizard gets happy with the shit sandwich.
Yeah.
But some people just have this ability to give a note, which almost like a relay race. It just energizes you to either do better, do different, or it gives you a burst of energy if it's well delivered. And then when they're not well delivered, just like this music is totally wrong. And it's like, you can feel the engines all just, and it's like, okay, so are we going to have a conversation? I mean, do you want me to act on that note? How do we, it's a really interesting skill. And there's as with so many of the parts of these industries, the assumption that someone's going to have those skills, like the assumption that someone's going to be a great manager or you name it, it's tricky. It isn't an automatic skill. And some people deliver them in very different ways. And you do have to, this is all very, these are not hardships, but they're just psychological little minefields, aren't they? That you've got to, as you say, get your lizard over.
Yeah. I think one of my big kind of lessons in life has been being a dog owner. That tickled them at the back.
Back to the shit sandwich.
Yeah. No, and that is that dogs never bark if they're not fucking terrified.
Right.
And I think that when I spoke to you of being hairdryered fairly recently on a job that, with a relationship with someone that I've had for many years, done some really successful projects with. And I could kind of go, okay, I don't appreciate being hairdryered. I mean, hairdrying is an English term for like having someone shout so hard that it dries your hair, the amount of oxygen or air that's coming
removes
in,
it all entirely.
Yes, exactly. And but I realised that they were just absolutely petrified. And frustrated.
Yeah.
That the communication. So I don't understand how I can explain this better. Why can't you do this? Yeah. And we got there, and it was, and then you find a middle ground, and it's a bit of compromise. But moving on off this, you've been doing something really exciting out in the fantastic state of Arizona.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that for a bit before we invite people on? You just click on the link below, Google Meet, and I can see that there's some people waiting to come in and have a little think about questions you'd like to ask Pascal. And I can take a bit of a back seat today, which would be fantastic. But so, Arizona, what have you been up to there?
Yeah, Arizona, really interesting project and lovely for me in the sense that so much of what I do, just goes down the old internet toilet, and we, in a very virtual world. And there are two things that sometimes get missed from that, which is just the idea of the sound happening in a physical space, like it would be in a gig or something, and also a connection with the folk who are consuming it. I mean, get nice emails and stuff from people. It's really lovely, but by and large, the audience is quite removed, which is a long preamble to say one of the aspects of this Arizona project, why it was excellent. There's a company called ScanLabs who do LiDAR scanning, and they started doing this about sort of, I think, 20 odd years ago, when the technology was less readily available. I think, the most recent iPhones will do a LiDAR scan, and LiDAR scanning is a bit like, in those science fiction movies where someone throws a little kind of ball which fires lasers all around a cavern, and then they get this extraordinary detailed map of the cavern back. I think
in 3D.
Yeah, and I think that happens in one of the Alien films. Yeah, it's basically that technology. You're firing laser beams into the environment, and they, like those guys, I think, when they're doing structural engineering and you see these yellow tripods and they're measuring stuff with lasers, you're getting information, really detailed information about the environment. And what you end up with is this very, very large data set, which you can then choose to visualize in various ways. So, for instance, they've done stuff for the BBC where you can travel through pyramids, because you can kind of move through the structure of it. You can pass through the walls, And a few years ago, I met them on a virtual reality project, actually, for the Guardian newspaper, when they had it was a really early experimental VR department. It doesn't exist anymore, but and we did a few projects in VR, which is where I first worked in ambisonics. ScanLab were deployed to create the environment for one of these virtual reality projects, and I enjoyed working with them, and we stayed in touch. And they then started doing their own film projects, and they did a thing called Frame Rate, which was, I think, essentially it was like a test of concept at first, but it very quickly had its own life. What they wanted to try was, so you've got this LiDAR scanning, why don't we do it time lapse, where we scan an area over a period of, say, 18 months. So we get a sense of how it, changes, erodes or whatever.
Amazing.
Yeah, so Frame Rate had all these different locations. There was Norfolk, there was like a marketplace, there was the various bits in the forest. And as I say, it sort of began as a proof of concept, really, but caught some imagination. And I scored and sound designed that, and it went round places like Tribeca and London Film Festival, lots of other festivals names of which have dropped out of my mind. But and the people who ran a place in Arizona, the Desert Botanical Garden, which is a really lovely, lovely place. It's almost like Kew Gardens, but in the desert. And they have quite an interesting program of involving artists with the gardens. And often that will take the place of sculpture. But they saw this film that ScanLab had done and approached ScanLab. And what arrived from all this was this huge commission to scan various bits of the desert and the gardens and the surrounding area, and then present that material with these vast screens buried in the gardens at the places where they'd scanned. So there are 4 sites like that. And then there's an indoor gallery which has a 10-screen presentation where the screens are all in various places around the room, on the ceiling and down below you and whatever. And we had an ambisonic rig in there, amazing L-acoustic rig. And again, so it's really interesting, scoring something that is time-lapse and trying to do a version of that with the sound and the music, and yet at the same time smooth people through the journey of a year or so in the desert. And one of the really shocking parts of one of the films actually shows I think it's a saguaro, a really ancient, enormous plant which can survive on, absolutely minimal water, actually dying because it's got so hot at certain times there. So, I mean, the project, I suppose you could say it's not overt messaging. I think their idea is really one of the best ways to get people to kind of care is simply show them the beauty of it. You don't need to give them a message. You just show them what's happening. But so you've got the plants and the cacti growing and developing and changing, and sometimes you've got much more microscopic films of individual buds right down at a really detailed level. And those are more sort of coloured, because essentially what you get when you turn the data set into a film is mostly black and white. So it has this curious kind of noir feeling, but then they can also choose, because the colour information is in there as far as I understand it. And they chose to make incredibly beautiful, very smooth, time lapse of the petals and the plants opening up and all the rest of it. And then there's also some stuff that's been scanned in the nearby housing developments and waste plants and stuff, just showing how the earth is shifting and building is happening. And great project. I mean, just so nice to do something that is, as I say, physicalized in the sense of people going into a room or wandering around. And
did you do that in a kind of as a surround mix, or how did you?
Yeah, so the outdoor sites, I mean, as with all these sorts of things, everything had to be tuned to the budget, and we wanted to do surround sound. I'd done a lot of work with ScanLab where we'd worked in a stereo, and something that initially was kind of consumed online, when it went into these galleries or film festivals, it suddenly felt frustrating that they were putting screens kind of around the room, but we just had stereo,
Yeah.
So there was a real determination on this one to work in a surround format.
Yeah.
The outdoor sites, though, we just financially it was more feasible to do the outdoor sites in stereo. So there's just a pair of speakers per outdoor site. But the indoor one, we went ambisonics, and I really enjoyed mixing in ambisonics.
So ambisonics, is that like 7.1, or is it? How does that work?
Crikey, I am gonna. Yeah, there should be a sort of enormous disclaimer about at this point about the level of my scientific grasp. So when you record in ambisonics, that's one of the first interesting things about it. We don't talk about so much about, say, surround microphones in the sense of, I'm going out to record in 7.1. We often build surround by patching together all kinds of different recordings from the same place. Ambisonics, you actually can capture a sphere of sound and using these tetrahedral microphones, and it's for what they call A format, or the first order, which is the kind of first level of resolution that you work in with ambisonics. That's a four mic tetrahedral array, and what's actually happening is all really based on the mid-side microphone sort of technique. So if you're familiar with mid-side, you'll know that one of the really cool things about mid-side, say if you're recording you're in a small crew and you're recording a documentary, and you've got sort of a single sound rig, it's all a bit run and gun. If you use mid-side and there's somebody talking, let's say somebody talking, but you've got this beautiful atmosphere, say a forest or something, so you want both. But you want the freedom in post to, have less of the stereo and more of the central voice, and not have any problems folding it down in mono. Mid-side is amazing for that, because you can literally decide later how much stereo width to have. And similarly with ambisonics, you record this sphere of sound, but you can decide later how that is then steered, and you can even tell that sphere to become like a shotgun mic or a figure of 8 or whatever. You can manipulate it. So, okay, this is where I'm really going to sketch around on the science, but it's not a channel-based surround format like 7.1, 5.1. It's a very different concept for how. So, when you're working with ambisonics in the room, almost the speakers are always kind of active. They all, in some micro way, add to the sphere. And the other amazing thing about ambisonics is it's very, you can collapse it into other formats really easily. You can take an ambisonic recording and turn it into stereo, or turn it into quad, make a mono of it. And in that sense, it can then adapt to whatever you happen to have in the room. It's like, okay, well, you've got these 4 speakers. Yeah, we can fold it down into that. There are really good explanations online that I'm not.
No, I mean, it's fascinating. When you were mixing it, do you have a ambisonic speaker array? Is it a quad kind of setup?
No. Or? So again, obviously, I think it's important to state that it's like the resolution, because you can go what's called first order, which is you record. There are 4 mics. And then you can go, second order gives you a bit more detail, and you can keep going up. But essentially, you can decode in such a way that you sort of have phantom speakers. So my studio has really a sort of kind of 5.1. I managed to add a couple of speakers to it. So let's say I had a 7.1 then you can, and then someone helped me. A guy called Tony Myatt, who's a real expert in all this, helped me. He wrote a decoder for me so that, because what you're essentially doing is you've got a room full of speakers all in, sort of strange positions.
Mm-hmm.
You need to time delay and process everything so that our experience of that will be as if there's a sphere of sound. So he writes a decoder, which means I can mix even with my rather peculiar speaker setup, because he comes in and measures all the distances and sorts out all the time delays and all the rest of it. So that's the sort of weird thing. You can be in an oblong room with speakers all around this oblong room, but you time delay the speakers on the side so that the appearances of us, or the audio appearance, what's the word? The audio sensation is of a sphere of speakers. I'm not doing a very good explanation of this because I don't, as you can tell, I don't fully understand the science
with the results? Did you get to go and visit?
Well, yeah. But I also, having worked in Atmos, I was really struck by, obviously immersive is a word that's endlessly bandied around at the moment. And there could be a lot. There could have been a lot wrong with my setup when I was working in Atmos, because I didn't have the full. I was effectively having to kind of monitor it in like 5.1. But what I found really interesting was immediately with the ambisonic mixing, it felt more immersive than anything I'd ever done in Dolby, which is not a criticism, because I think, as I say, it could have been to do with the setup. But there's something about they are very different systems, and I think psychoacoustically, for me, it felt more genuinely surrounding and immersive than I'd managed, at least in my space, to achieve with Atmos or 5.1 or 7.1.
Amazing. And we're going to play tomorrow, aren't we? You've brought some different mics, including an ambisonic. So.
Yeah, I brought a Reynolds 4-channel A format microphone. There's lots of those around now. The Rode do one, and Sennheiser do the Ambio, and Soundfield used to. And they used to be much more expensive. I think because they use these quite economically priced capsules, they've come down a lot in price, and it is great. It's amazing if you can take a wild track using ambisonics and then fill in specific holes with mono recordings. Is a great way of working, because I think there's something very persuasive actually. Even if the detail is not, the resolution is not that high in terms of where things are placed, there's something very persuasive about ambisonics that somehow fools the ear in a really useful way, that there is a 3D sound space. And of course it's capturing above as well.
And so completes the format is inviting guests up, having a chat, and then having to depart with money, because I'll be straight on ambisonic mics later. Should we invite some people on to have a chin wag with? And I don't know, Simon and Alan, do you have any questions for us as we end towards the end of the year, going into the new year?
Yeah, so I think the main one, now that it is coming to the end of the year, was your favourite film of the year for both of you. It's a hard one.
It's a difficult one. But actually, it's not a difficult one for me. Is it One Battle After? The P.T. Anderson film.
Yeah. No spoilers. I haven't seen it yet, so
no
spoilers.
Won't be any spoilers. I don't know. I think that I'm sure a lot of us can say the same thing. Been binging on box sets and been into this amazing kind of golden era of television and this, that, and the other. And there's just one comment that was made by Quentin Tarantino, who's in everyone's bad books at the moment because of Paul Dano comment. But his yet another one of his criticisms was that a lot of these long-running series are really impressively made and well scripted and well shot and scored and everything. but they are soap operas. And I think that what we're losing with this, certainly a few box sets I've seen recently, you can feel these things being recommissioned. And the arc being, okay, let's kind of try and extend that. And I think what the Paul Thomas Anderson thing did for me was just remind me of what an excellent format a feature film is, a movie.
Yeah, something that ends and that is the end. I mean, I realize,
and the Greeks established this 3-act structure that seems to work very well. But also, I am absolutely convinced, and I'm sure I'll be proven wrong on this, but I'm convinced that there's going to be a real resurgence of independent cinema. And this was a very expensive film that he made that felt like an independent film. But I can just detect in my kids a real love of cinema. And maybe it's not just, appreciating this 3-act, 2-hour, 3-hour structure, 3 hours if it was the Paul Thomas Anderson, but the fact that you get to go somewhere and share an experience with some of your friends, some strangers, but where your phone is fucking switched off. And it's like, actually, guys, we're going to switch the lights off and tell you not to use your phones, which is what the cinema is about these days. And in fact, that's a refreshing escape. Yeah,
and the stories you hear as well about writers for the screen being told to bear in mind what they call dual screeners.
So I thought that was just a myth. That's what people are being said. But you have friends who are writers.
I mean, I don't think it is a myth. I think there is a real sense in which there is sometimes a presumption that someone's attention may be split, and therefore a certain character may need to, re-expose a bit of the narrative. Which of course, for a lot of writers is like, expositionary dialogue is kind of like, no. But you hear a lot about that. And I was thinking about just that, I think you used the word commitment then, just to leave the house and go to another box, to see something it feels like a tiny step, but it's still such an important step. It will engage you with the thing. Mm-hmm. In such a different way.
You value it differently.
Yeah. I mean, I know it's a very obvious thing to say, but...
Favourite film for you?
God, I immediately had that awful kind of like, I really can't remember what I've seen this year. And I'm going to cop out because really one of my favourite experiences in film that I can remember over the past year was rewatching Local Hero.
Oh,
which is one of my all-time favorite films. But and I think whenever you have favorite films like that, it's always fascinating when you revisit them and you see how they've weathered.
Yeah, and it's weathered well.
I think it's still such an incredible watch. Just wonderful characters and pacing and humour and heartfelt.
And score by Mark Knopfler.
Yeah, Mark Knopfler.
And it's a beautiful theme, really beautiful theme. And is it Burt Lancaster?
Yeah, Burt Lancaster plays the head of the Knox Oil and Gas. I mean, the story it's basically about a kind of an oil man who is sent over to Scotland to essentially buy a little town so they can build a refinery there. And this involves having to pay everyone off but they're way too wily, and so not only do the villagers and their representative, who Mr. Urquhart, who's played by Dennis Lawson, they kind of run rings around him, but at the same time he falls in love with the place such that it's very sad when he leaves. And there's a great story because when the film was first shown, I think to the whoever paid for it, the oil man, he leaves. It's very sad. He's fallen in love with the place, but he's been sent back to Texas. Meanwhile, Burt Lancaster has come over and decided in any event that the place should have a conservatory and a research centre because he too has sort of fallen in love with it. So it's a very bittersweet, lovely ending. But we really feel for, McIntyre, who's come over, and you see him back in his flat in Texas, smelling the shells from the beach and feeling very sad. He's also, by the way, fallen in love with a woman out there.
Yeah, of course.
But and the apparently the money people just sort of said, "Oh God, it's a bit of a downer, isn't it?" Can we not? No, we're going to have to rethink the ending. But they were stuffed. It was like, and then an editor remembered that. So in the film, McIntyre has to call back to the US, and he can only do it from this call box in the village, which is practically out in the sea. And an editor remembered that they had a really good long shot of the phone box and the little run of houses in the village. And they just stuck that on in the end, and they had the phone ringing, and it was just enough to give people the hope that what McIntyre was doing is he's calling back saying, "Sod it, I'm coming back over." It just gave them enough of a sort of hint that there was more story.
Brilliant.
Because I love that. That's really good.
Fantastic.
But I know that's a cop-out, sorry. And I will try and think of actually something I've seen this year. I've seen some things I didn't like. And
Weapons. That's a good movie.
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah.
Welcoming
Hello.
the fellowship. Hello, people speaking from far and wide.
Humans.
And the question was favourite film of the year. Pascal's been working in ambisonics and is also
badly explaining it.
No, not at all. And also, been doing your fantastic work with podcasts.
Yeah, lots of that this year. Lots of endless true crime. It's always true crime.
So if anyone's got some questions or some thoughts to share, stick your hands up. It's nice to see Adam is tuned in from Manchester. How are you doing, sir?
I'm great. I've spent the last 3 days trying to figure out how to reroute all my contact instruments, and actually my computer can find them. It's been a nightmare.
Joyous.
Not good at all.
No.
And I'm going to be doing, for our Hangover special, I'm going to be doing some reviews and some chats about Piano Book. Things haven't been going as smoothly as I'd hoped with a whole bunch of stuff.
Okay.
So Piano Book feels like to a lot of people that it's kind of, it's been parked. It hasn't. We've been doing loads of improvements with the website and this, that, and the other. And in fact, part of the we're going to be reformatting the podcast, still inviting people on to chat and stuff, but into more of a weekly workshop, so things don't get into these big production queues. And that's part of what we'll be doing with our rug shop. We're not going to call it the rug shop. We're going to call it something else. What I want to do is it's actually got a shop front, and what I want to do is actually make it a speakeasy. So it looks like something entirely random, like I don't know, so like Edinburgh tuna supplies or something like that. And then when you walk through, in you go, and there's all of this
presidential
gear and kit.
Wigs.
But I think it's going to be called the Jean Allison Centre, named after my mother-in-law, who taught, and she's still with us, but she's retired. But she used to teach at the roughest school in Edinburgh, Westerhales, and it was so rough she got an MBE for it.
My God!
But also, her books appear in all music classes across Scotland. But also, she introduced synthesizers into the music education system in Scotland, and then it kind of rolled out the rest of the UK. So she's a total unsung hero.
I wonder what it was she first took in. Would it be a Roland SH something?
No, it was an ARP 2600.
Oh wow!
A lady of taste.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're going to name it after her.
Yes, we're going to name it after her. What are we doing tomorrow? We're going and doing...
a bit of field recording.
You're a passionate field recordist.
Yeah, I haven't been out enough
But
recently.
you do tend to not leave home without a recorder often.
Yeah.
And I know the first time you visited me up here, there are bits of the house that you were recording.
Yeah, there's a
Jack the
yours,
Ripper thing that you were recording. And do you want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah, your drive and your gate has got into all kinds of scrapes in my work. Yeah, I mean, I think I was, and I've definitely said this before in your company, I was really switched onto it through meeting Chris Watson, who's an incredible wildlife sound recordist, and you know was one of the founders of Cabaret Voltaire, who've had an amazing sort of final, if you want a better tour, you know, over this year. And I think one of the things, well, the stuff I've brought up for this is perhaps some of the less usual microphones that you might use when you're out and about. So I brought up a parabolic mic, a Telinga. So that's a microphone that sits in essentially something that looks a bit like a satellite dish, and that's amazing for isolating sounds, particularly things like birdsong.
I had an intrusive thought actually earlier, which I probably shouldn't share because I was going to wind you up by saying, yeah, it's a local children's playground. We can go and record that. Just two 50-year-olds with a radar microphone.
That is one of it is one of those things where you always get a bit, if you wander around with it, it's like,
what are you doing?
Asking for trouble. And brought a geophone up and some contact mics. But I love to, I mean, you know what it's like. You spend hours and hours sat on your bum in the studio, and I think the practical realities of making a lot of production sound means, yes, you end up with lots of libraries of sound and you use sound effects and all the rest of it. But it's very satisfying if you can go and collect your own. And it's very easy now to do it, and the technology is extraordinary and more cost effective. And it going back to what we said earlier about, you know, the commitment of going to the cinema or something. When you leave the house to collect sound, it creates a story, it creates an experience, creates an engagement, and it creates a kind of listening that is, even for those of us working in sound, you know, in a noisy world, we spend a lot of time filtering, cognitively, you know, squashing down a lot of sound that we don't want present. And going out and recording in you know, wherever, whether it's a city or a forest or whatever, it's a great way to get your ears opened right back up again and to take in it all. You know, and then of course, you end up with some stuff in your library, like your garden gate. That, gets used.
I'm familiar with gates. For those of you who remember the good old days with in lockdown, etc., etc. I learned a really amazing fact, and you can find this. There's a documentary about it on YouTube. Robert Zemeckis directed Castaway with Tom Hanks.
Yeah,
it's 100% sound design and ADR.
Wow.
There's not a single bit of production sound in that movie. And when you bear in mind there's no dialogue, basically they came to the conclusion that the noise of the waves crashing and the wind would cause so many continuity problems. So they were, whilst they were shooting, instead of shooting live production sound, they were shooting, and they were having to archive and list long wave coming in with big drag out, wave over rocks, all of these things. But every single sound in that has been put in by hand. Yeah, check that on YouTube. It's absolutely fascinating.
Nuts.
Yeah, amazing. And I mean, so much fun. And I think that these things, I mean, this is something that I've been wildly passionate about with people, like getting into music, is the temptation to part a lot of cash on stuff. You know, there's no denying the fact that software just is pretty much worthless the minute you kind of open it up. And I think there's a real temptation, and I'm so totally guilty for engineering this culture, being partly responsible with my work with Spitfire, of this idea of you need to buy a sample library. And I always say, buy a microphone. You know, and just get something that has a tone with it, make your own sounds, because it's a guarantee of originality and authenticity, I think.
Yeah, and the other thing I always think is, you know, we spend quite a lot of time and YouTube videos and all the rest of it talking about reintroducing movement and shape and sometimes randomization into audio, and when you record in the natural world or even, the urban environment, whatever, you get a lot of that for free. If you record the sea, the movement, the granularity, or a forest or the wind, you get so much information that if you play with it, slow it down, you name it, filter it so that it becomes more of a pure tone, you end up with something that has this, it has a kind of organic authenticity. And that's one of the reasons I think Ben Burtt's sound design for Star Wars is so effective, because so much of it is derived from real sounds. And when you record real sounds, which I know is an odd phrase because, what's a real sound, but a sound that, has all of the foibles and natural variation that the natural world tends to create, it's very convincing, I think. Banging a spanner on a telegraph pole wire to create a laser. Do that on a synth, but there's a grit, there's a shape, there's a
complexity
and
chaos.
And I think our ears are tuned to that and want that. And
It's I experimented with using rain as a trigger source for this beast behind you, and it's really interesting that the sound of the rain is gone, but you recognize it as rain, even though rain is chaotic and apparently random. We are so sensitive with these these chaotic patterns. Dex, how are you, sir?
Very good, thank you. I was just thinking, if you were thinking of getting into this field recording, do you have any recommendations for hardware? Zoom? Yeah,
Zoom have great equipment that's really well priced. I would definitely say there's an amazing sound designer, sound supervisor called Timothy Nielsen, who did a lot of Pixar stuff, worked at Skywalker Sound. And he's got this, you sometimes see his videos and he's got these extraordinary levels of kit. But he says, the best recorder is always just the one you have in your bag. And there's stuff, I know for a fact that he has iPhone recordings that have made their way into feature films. These days, it's extraordinary what you can get, even just on a phone. If in doubt, just record it with what you've got. Zoom are really popular, and I think justifiably so, because they're a really good price point and allow you to do, really good stuff at a decent, budget.
Yeah,
you can spend a fortune, but you honestly, that's a whole other conversation. And I think it for the business of just getting out there and taking down some of the sounds around the world and then having a play around with them, something like a Zoom, perfect. But even your phone will do a good job. Yeah.
I've got a couple of thoughts on that. One is, try the cheapest point of entry to see if it's actually something you want to do, continue doing. And then after that point, just consider the hardware that you buy. I think not enough people think of stuff as investments. And I think it's quite easy to be kind of blown away by feature sets and this, that, and the other. I think it's quite good to Google occasionally what do the pros use and stuff. And I have a problem with Zoom because they used to make terrible guitar multi-effects processors, but I think they're an excellent company. Something that I would recommend, Dex, is try and look for stuff that's 32-bit floating point. And the reason I say that is there's still equipment that you can buy that's quite expensive that isn't that. But the great thing about 32-bit floating point is that you don't have to be so concerned with gain staging and the amount of kind of bandwidth you're using digitally.
Yeah,
I don't know if you'd agree with that.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, in the field, you've got such a huge dynamic range if you're working at 32-bit that. Yeah, you're not having to constantly adjust your preamps to cope with what might be, suddenly an over loud sound. It'll probably handle it. It's not. Yeah, and a lot of them. There's a lot more of that happening now because the prices come down. still the thing that tends to push because all of the digital side of it is, incredibly cheap these days, but very good quality preamps still cost quite a lot. And if you're the more substantial or expensive machines like the sound devices and the Sonos Axes and all the rest of it, they have a lot of the money is in that side of it.
Yeah.
But it does depend a bit on what you're recording, But yeah.
Yeah. And I think that what was really interesting is I've got an old fashioned Nagra, and we tried to do
like a tape.
Yeah, tape one. Yeah. We tried to do some recording with that, and you suddenly realise that gain staging in the good old days wasn't just about stopping overloads, but it was like if you recorded things too quiet, all you got was hiss, tape hiss.
All you could hear is the tape. Yeah,
yeah. So that was it. It was like a permanent, so something you'd really have to keep your hands on. And you were saying something really interesting earlier about a podcast that you really recommend, or a
Dan Worrell.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have heard of it.
Yeah.
And what he said about enjoyment in use.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone hasn't seen any of Dan Worrell's videos, I'd really highly recommend them. If you've listened to any of or watched any of the Fab Filter sort of official promo videos, you may have heard his voice because he does those for them. He's very interesting. He's very good on the science of all of this, as well as the art. And he also, if you kind of subscribe or you're a paying subscriber to his channel, you can get sort of mix advice and all that. He's well worth searching. It's Worrell, Worall. But he did a very interesting video recently about, I think someone had posted a question to him about, the analog sound and what that meant to him, and was it something that was worth the hype that can sometimes swirl around it, and how much people were pursuing it. And he sort of made the point that, lots of these mixing desks and microphones and stuff that have shepherded some of the most famous albums that we've heard, these were like incredible alchemical moments where something amazing happened in the studio. And he said those same studios and those same desks will have made dreadful recordings and really dreadful. And, the noisy pots and all kinds of problems with all this gear, which he kind of goes through. So in one sense, I suppose he's warning against any kind of hysteria that suddenly some kind of, emulation of an analog piece of gear is going to add the magic to your music, because there's a whole bunch of things that sort of come together. But he does then, at the end, he makes the point about how, it is really important to enjoy the equipment that you use. And if you feel you have an affinity with it and you enjoy using it, that's also important. And if it helps, in your particular setup, even if on paper or scientifically it's not really doing that much, So he allows for that. And we do, you do sit with this stuff. You have to use it in the field and spend time with it and live with it. It might as well be something you get some pleasure from.
Absolutely.
And that can come from a lot of different things,
Absolutely. I think that we've run out of time, Jay, so maybe next time, Governor. But just before we sign off, any resolutions for the new year?
Oh, blimey.
Whilst you're thinking, I'm just going to remind everyone that we won't be doing a Wednesday live podcast next week. It'll be on Tuesday, the eve of Christmas Eve, because most of the planet celebrates Christmas on Christmas Eve, so we don't want to interrupt family time. And then for your hangovers, we will be having a gentle cup of... I won't have a hangover, which I'm really looking forward to. I'm going to be very smug. A smug broadcast from us on Wednesday. We love a smug broadcast.
Smug.
On the 1st of January. So do join us for that, and there'll be maybe a bit of a quizzery and maybe some competitions, and a little bit of a looking forward to the new year, because it hasn't been the easiest of years this year. for me, for Crow Hill, for various different things. We are loving what for the planet. We're loving what we're doing, but I think we're looking a little bit with a little less uncertainty and a bit more kind of passion and confidence for the new year. And I'm really excited to share all sorts of stuff that we'll be working on. And my resolution for the new year is just to absolutely get off social media. It's not good for us.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah. God.
It's just, it's bad for us.
Yeah.
We can't solve all the problems that's happening to all the human beings, whilst also this, I think they call it compare and despair.
That's so true.
And I just think I need to avoid that, because every day someone is standing at Abbey Road Studios and I'm not there. And that makes me feel terrible.
And they may well feel terrible too, but you're comparing your inner life with their outer life. Yeah. But in a weird way, the only resolution I was thinking of just then slightly relates to that. I really want at some point in 2026, when I have to sit down and write a bit of music for something, I want to do it. I want to sit down at a piece of paper and just try and think of it and try and write it down. Because, and it's back to the reason I think it's slightly connected to what you're talking about, this kind of box of infinity that we can all dive into. It's I always bang on about this. It's one of the biggest issues I have with the sheer terabytes of potential that sit around in the studio, and the plugins and the synths and the emulations and the possibilities are just too wide open. And and what happens then is I fall into fairly repetitive physical gestures on the keyboard and all this bit. And I really want to push myself to go, all right, this needs, say, a tune or something. I'm going to go and sit down with only my head and my imagination and try and come up with something on paper before I leap into that big old, infinite box of stuff. Because there's always this cart and horse with the technology, and it's really fun that sometimes you drive the technology and other times it drives you. We all know that, you sort of hit a patch on a synth and you go, right, well, let's
work around that. Yeah.
So, it's really nice to embrace that, but I'd love to just tilt it back the other way a little bit in 26.
That's a great thought. And I think that sets us up for a conversation that we can have next Tuesday on hopes, plans for the new year from all of you wonderful people. And really thank you, as always, for coming on. And so it's just so lovely to see familiar, friendly faces. So we'll be coming live to you next Tuesday, and we'll be joined from the Mediterranean by Oliver Patrice Weber.
I'm excited about his new thing. I'm looking forward to hearing about that.
And it's just going to be lovely to catch up with him. And look forward to a really exciting new year and holiday period. So, Pascal, thank you so much. And I'm really looking forward to us having a play tomorrow. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do, because we're going to be pointing radar mics not in children's playgrounds.
Yeah, memo to self.
Somewhere else. Lots of love. See you next week.
If you feel like you are losing a grip, might suffer a trip,